You're live.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. This first we'll just do attendance. So we could just go around and say present, your name and present. So Taylor Yates present.
Carol Barbarian present.
Sarah Donham present.
Renee Wall present.
Alicia Gardner-Tadros present.
Andy Osborne present.
Okay, cool. Let's start. Let's get right into ADUs. By the way, I should say, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you all for sticking it out last week. I know we had 2 public hearings and then a lot of planning stuff to discuss, and I do not aspire for another 4-hour meeting tonight. So hopefully we put a pin in, or not put a bow on a lot of things last week. So why don't we start by I'll open the public hearing. I'll move to open the public hearing on continue the public hearing on the ADU bylaw amendments for sections 1, 3, 4, and 6, and the MBTA 3A bylaw amendments to sections 2 and 9. And for context, what we were trying to do tonight is just the final review of language and a vote to on favorable or unfavorable action at town meeting. We did the substantive remaining policy work last week, and that was, in particular, we voted to not allow short-term rentals at in these ADUs, and we also voted to allow a 5% lot coverage maximum bonus so long as it was part of a home with an ADU and it was for the purpose of the ADU. Okay. Yes, Carol.
Quick clarification. Are we voting tonight on what we are recommending to be in the warrant? And then on the 28th, we'll recommend favorable or unfavorable action before town meeting, because that way we can look at amendments at the same time.
So my understanding was tonight we were going to do recommendation of the language, and then the next meeting we were just going to discuss amendments.
Okay.
But again, I'm not.
The vote on favorable action would probably come closer to town meeting.
A vote on unfavorable action?
So unfavorable action would be usually closer to town meeting. I don't think it really matters. I don't think that it's going to change.
I agree with you. I think you're right on that. I don't think it really matters. I think I will put it to you this way. If we do not give the town clear direction tonight, I think we are creating problems for a lot of people, not least of which is ourselves. So, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, typically when you make your recommendations, I'll write the planning board report the following day. And within that report, typically the language says whether you are recommending favorable action or not. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just put a pin in this for a second? Let's go through, why don't we go through the language, and then we'll come back and decide what we want to do. So Chris and Paul, I can think of a couple ways to do this. Number one is you guys can show us what you have done and changed since our last meeting. And that probably falls into 2 categories. One is just tidying up that needed to be done to align with your understanding of the law. And second is to implement the policy preferences that we stated at our last meeting.
Did you want me to give the presentation, or do you want to wait on that?
Oh yeah, sorry. I saw you're right. You did send that nice presentation. Yeah, let's do that, and then we can talk about the language.
I will try to keep it to 15 minutes or less, unless anybody has any questions. But the bottom line is that everything you're going to see in here we'll be talking about related to the language in the bylaw anyway. So hopefully, in many senses, this is just sort of a refresher for the public or an introduction to the public, because we're in a public meeting, public hearing. And so it just kind of puts all things together. So I'll just be very quick about this. These are just some of the key issues that I have specific slides on. We talk about what an ADU is, which is a small residential living space located on the same lot as another home, which can be internal within the existing primary residence or attached or completely detached. Massachusetts passed the Affordable Homes Act last year to allow ADUs to be built by right in single-family zoning districts. And this just is another graphic example of the different types of ADUs that are out there. So meeting the law, first and foremost, towns simply must ensure that ADUs can be established based on the requirements of the law. This does not mean that all towns must pass an ADU bylaw, but it may be prudent to do so. And I think in this case, for us, it is because otherwise towns would be needing to evaluate each ADU permit application based on the state requirements and local zoning, ensuring that local zoning does not conflict with the state. And developing the bylaw makes it simpler to administer and ensure that towns don't run afoul of the law. It also can provide some additional protections permissible under the law, like restricting short-term rentals. And the state published their final regulations in late January, and the town's been working with town council to calibrate our bylaw to meet those requirements. Some basics of the law: ADUs must maintain a separate entrance, be no larger than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is less, meet reasonable local town restrictions, and avoid the prohibitions that are in the state law. So what is the town trying to accomplish? Trying to develop a bylaw that is compliant and reasonable, includes definitions, standards, and process that are workable. Working with town council, ensure that the proposed bylaw meets all state requirements and is not significantly more lenient than those requirements. So how does the bylaw that we've created differ from the state? I'll go through a chart or a table that kind of shows the comparison of each section of the state law and how we've addressed it. But I'd say the primary difference is really providing a minimum minor increase in lot coverage and a minor decrease in minimum open space to kind of facilitate the development of the ADUs in some places. Single-family zoning is sort of the core of the state law. The state requires that cities and towns ensure that the rules apply to all zoning districts that allow single-family zoning, including Belmont's general residence or GR zoning district, which also allows two-family homes, and lots in general residence with two-family homes, according to the law, will also be allowed to establish a protected use ADU on their lot. And interestingly, lots in any district that allows single-family homes, including local business, must also allow a protected use ADU. Some have been concerned about impacts on this law related to Belmont, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. Due to the cost of developing an ADU, it's not anticipated that a significant number will be built over the next few years. Some have suggested maybe at most 1% per year, especially given construction costs and interest rates. The three areas of potential impact that many are concerned about include traffic, parking, and stormwater. And I think we believe that there will not be a significant impact in any of those areas. And impacts to schools is extremely unlikely. Non-conforming lots is a big part of the law. Very clearly established is the provision: a municipality may not prohibit the development of a protected use ADU in an existing structure or principal dwelling or lot due to non-conformance. This is also reinforced in the definitions of principal dwelling and protected use ADU. Therefore, if a lot is non-conforming related to lot size, it still must be allowed to establish a protected use ADU. Belmont's bylaw clearly notes this, but does not allow additional non-conformity beyond those additional lot coverage or open space provided for in the proposed dimensional requirements. So in effect, all of those dimensional requirements for accessory buildings, for primary buildings, will all have to be met. Setbacks and other dimensions included. So I just want to very quickly compare the state draft regulations. It's no longer a draft, they're finalized today. Basically, they encourage a production of ADUs with a goal of increasing housing production and balance municipal interests while regulating use, empowering property owners to add housing stock. Basically, Belmont's draft bylaw, pretty much all the statement of purpose relates to the increase of housing supply. Definitions, there's a lot of them in the state regulations. This just shows what the state definition is and what we did with it. You can see there's a mix where we basically take the same definition that the state had. In some cases, we've added some additional language to it, but in most cases, it's exactly the same. In some cases, we're using the existing town bylaw. And in some cases, we're not using any of their definitions at all because we don't think that they're necessary. Here's the rest of the definitions. Again, some of them are exactly the same, some of them are not provided, and some use the existing bylaw definition. So section 7103, regulation of protected use ADUs. They have owner occupancy requirements. We can't have those, and we're compliant with that. We can't have minimum parking except for the one spot outside of the transit area. We can't have use and occupancy restrictions. We can't have unit caps and density provisions. And so all of this is compliant with the state law. We do not have a section on unreasonable regulation, but we meet all of these standards that the state requires. And then finally, regulation in single-family residential zoning districts, unreasonable regulation, historic districts, pre-existing ADUs and multiple ADUs. We're compliant with all of those. So what we have done is develop a system for additional maximum lot coverage and lower minimum open space to correspond to lot size and area characteristics. This does not increase lot coverage from a maximum of the bylaws. Essentially, what we've done is basically 5% for each zoning district. In this proposal, existing lots that are non-conforming will not have that related to lot size will not have that non-conforming apply to the ADUs, but would be subject to design and site plan review. And it would be up to the board as to whether other detached ADUs or additions resulting in additional lot coverage should be subject to design and site plan review.
Can you explain this? I'm not sure I actually understood what you meant, like as a practical matter.
Are you talking about the nonconformity side of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if your nonconformity is lot size, then that's not taken into consideration. If you have a non-conforming lot size, you can still develop an ADU as long as you can meet all the dimensional standards. So, but you would be subject to design and site plan review. And so, you do have the option of having that non-conforming lot have the ADU, but you have to go through that extra step. So existing lots that are non-conforming may increase that non-conformity up to the revised maximums that we've provided for open space and lot coverage. But if they want to exceed that number, then they would have to be seeking a special permit from the planning board. And we'd need to probably put some special permit provisions in place for that. This is the dimensional analysis I think I showed you the last time and was in one of my reports. And this is one example for SRA, but this is how our new dimensional requirements table looks. So you can see that for all of the districts that apply in the bylaw, single residence A through D and general residence, that you can increase the maximum lot coverage by 5%. Each of these is 5% more than is in section 4. And then correspondingly, in most cases, we've reduced the minimum open space by the same 5%, except for 3 different districts. Single residence A, which is 43%, single residence B is 43%, and then general residence, which is staying at 35% because they really can't afford to reduce any further. And so we also have a footnote which says that maximum lot coverage includes the coverage requirements again in section 421, plus a fixed additional percentage as applicable and is provided in column 2 above. And then correspondingly, minimum open space has been reduced by the proportional amount of land allowed as additional lot coverage with an initial reduction if outside of the transit area. So the one little twist, which makes single residence B and A 43%, is that we've given a 500 square foot additional lot coverage provision for those districts because they have to have additional parking. They have to have that additional parking space. And we've been fairly generous in giving them 300 or 500 square feet for that. And that's what drops their minimum open space from 45 to 43. And that's it. So at that point, I mean, I don't know if Paul, you have anything you wanted to add to that, but if not, we can jump right into the to the bylaw, and we can show you some of the changes that we've made since the last time you've been with us.
I don't have anything to add. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, before we jump into the bylaw, maybe we'll give the board members a chance to ask questions or make comments. All right, do you want to go first?
Yes, if I may. For the LB districts, the residentials are allowed by special permit. And the way I read it, it's protected, it's by right. So I just want to make sure that, you know, I mean, they're allowed. It's just like any other residential units in an LB district, LB1, LB2, or LB3.
It protects
That's
an ADU can only exist, and a protected use ADU can only exist on a lot that contains a principal dwelling. So the proponent of an ADU would still need to obtain the special permit to have the principal dwelling with the single family home before they would have the right to have the accessory use of an ADU as a right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ara. Any other questions from the board? Okay. I guess Chris and Paul take it away on the language. Of particular interest to me is seeing the language that implemented the policy preferences we set out last week. But other than that, you guys do what you think you need to show us.
Okay, let me just increase the size. Okay, so we didn't make any changes. I think there were actually one change in this applicability section in 611, but it's not really a big part of what we're trying to do. The meat is in section 6.14, which is a new section being proposed. And so one thing that has been added is that a D has been added to 614.1 purpose to ensure compliance with the portions of Chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024. Definitions, we have made some small changes here. We added the building code. We added the fire code. We just emphasized that those who are concerned about historic districts or buildings that we are referring to the list in section 6320. One change was that we removed, I mean, manufactured housing now is part of modular dwelling unit, and I think I emphasized that in my report.
Can I just ask one quick question, Chris? I feel like that was a kind of like a big point of discussion in the language, and I don't think I ever really understood why.
Why it was a big point of our discussion?
Yeah, why like the manufactured, why we needed to discuss so much manufactured versus modular. And since we're putting a bow on it tonight, I just want to make sure I understand why we went the direction we went.
Well, I'll take a crack at it and see if Paul has anything to add to it. Essentially, modular dwelling units, I think as it first came out in the regulations, made an exception that that did not include manufactured housing, which I'm not an expert at the technical difference between the two or the definitional difference at the state level, but a lot of people out there in the public do not like the term manufactured housing because it tends to reflect, you know, trailer homes. And manufactured housing has evolved over many years to be something more closely resembling a single family home, but they still tend to be, short and long and kind of resemble trailers. So, but I think the state pivoted and said we can't make that a distinction or exception. So they removed the language. So you can have manufactured housing as part of a accessory dwelling unit. You can bring them on the lot as long as they meet the building code, which is another matter. But I think that was the reason I think it was emphasized because we wanted to let people know that back in the original definition, it didn't include manufactured housing, but unfortunately or fortunately, whatever your perspective is, now it does again.
Okay, thank you.
So we've added the subway station definition. And I think the reasoning for that, in my discussions with town council, is that at some point, maybe in the future, there may be extensions to subway lines and they may find themselves touching or entering Belmont. So it'd be good to have that,
Or simply within half a mile of Belmont.
or half a mile within Belmont. Yep. And we created a new definition called transit adjacent lot, which are those lots that are within a half mile from the center of a transit station. And we've carried that definition into the text as well. And primarily the distinction is related to parking. So we'll touch on that.
Right. Parking and the knock-on effects on open space and lot coverage as a result of parking.
Correct. So in section 614.4, you can see that we reinstated the prohibition on short-term rentals. And here is the new dimensional table where we've taken the straight 5% across the board and added it to all districts. But one of the things that I think you should see is that, for example, in this first cell, you have transit adjacent lot in single residence A. And where that makes a difference is that we're not providing them with an open space bonus, so to speak, of additional lot coverage. We basically say that, because you are there and you do not have to have that parking space, that you can have the 45% minimum open space. But any other lot in a single residence A outside of the transit adjacent area can drop their open space down to 43% because they have to have that additional parking space.
Chris, do you want to pause on the last sentence of subparagraph D for a moment? Beginning with
Yes.
the principal dwelling?
Yes. Okay. So this is just basically our updated language to, connect to the table. Any lot containing a new detached ADU, an ADU created by adding gross floor area to the principal dwelling, or any ADU created by adding gross floor area to an existing detached accessory building or structure shall meet the lot coverage and open space requirements of Table 614.5D below. The principal dwelling and any driveway, parking space, or accessory structure other than an ADU on the lot shall still be subject to the lot coverage and open space requirements of Section 421. Also, these dimensional requirements, many of them are the same. but it just emphasizes that ADU shall be subject to the height and setback requirements applicable to the structure in which the principal dwelling unit is located. There? You're-
I- so I don't understand why residents we care about going from 45% to 43%. They have huge lots, and their houses aren't going to be half the size of their lots because their lots, what's the minimum lot size? 25,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So I worry this table's too complicated, and I think anything we can do to simplify it. And I just don't think where we have huge lots that they need an extra little allowance for a little parking space. I just don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
This gets very complicated, and I'm not sure. It's a subtlety that I'm not sure matters, to be honest. But that's
Well, I mean,
a person.
So
the explanation of the of how we got to this number isn't necessarily something that we're going to be, providing a lot of information about other than right here. It essentially becomes the number. But the number has to be considered reasonable and fair by the planning board. So whatever you think should be provided for minimum open space, certainly that's what we'll do.
Carol, do you have a comment on that?
More just a follow-up question. Would it be possible, instead of doing percentages for the open space, could we potentially just allow, a certain amount of square footage? So, I mean, figure out how big is a parking space, and then that way across the board, instead of reducing our open space, we can just do that allowance. Would that make it easier? Or, the allowance with the exception of it could be, X number of square feet more if a parking space is required. So, I mean, obviously we're going to need to reduce the minimum open space in conjunction with the increase in max lot coverage. But if we're worried about parking and someone not having space for a parking space, I think it would make sense to just do it square footage wise if they need it, if they're outside that half mile.
Are you trying to suggest that the entire column 3 be replaced by a square footage number?
I don't know if that's the easiest, because column 3 does have to be relatable to the increase in lot coverage that we're allowing. But where you were mentioning certain properties are outside of a half mile, so they have to have that one parking space, and then they might require more space. It just seems like the allowance could be
The
built
only
in.
way I could really see that. So, Carol, I hear what you're getting at. And I think there's like some solid logic to it. The only way I could see that working is if Chris and Ryan can tell us, hey, you can take you take the open space, and for these categories you subtract out, a fixed square foot number from whatever percentage you have. But now we're getting to some, I don't know. Now we're getting into some complicated stuff, and as Thayer mentioned, I think we're trying to go the other direction.
Right. So what I was thinking is we're trying to allow for the increased lot coverage. And so that's a pretty straightforward. If it's just the lot coverage, the open space is a simple calculation of how much more or how much we need to decrease the open space by. So if the variable in that is the parking space, then we can keep the open space numbers where they would be just based on the increased lot coverage.
It may not be simply the parking space. There's probably going to be additional driveway space to reach the parking space. There might be a little bit of external coverage required for utilities, or building systems. So it's not quite as simple as picking out the square footage of a standard parking space and implementing that. Using a percentage requires when using a percentage creates some flexibility across lots and a little bit less engineering on the front end than trying to do the calculation that I think you're suggesting.
I'm going to move on unless there's any other questions at this point. We certainly can come back and revisit this.
Let's do it, Chris.
I
Let's
wanted
move
to
on.
let
We'll
you
come back to this.
Yeah, I wanted to let you know that we added a note that these dimensions are only applicable for the establishment of an ADU as a or part of a new accessory building or new building addition. I think that was based on the discussions we had previously. We made some slight changes to the language in 614.6C, talking about permeable pavers or asphalt may be utilized for a secondary driveway intended to serve the ADU, whether or not consistent with the existing driveway. So previously we had a situation where anything you built a secondary driveway had to be the exact same material as the existing driveway. And so what we're saying here is that, to be a little bit more environmentally friendly, we could use permeable material that might be slightly different, just so that we don't add that impervious surface that's 100%, stormwater shedding. And then D, any increase in parking or driveway area on a lot to serve an ADU shall not result in a violation of minimum required open space pursuant to table 614.5 D above. Design requirements are essentially the same. Made some slight changes to the design and site plan review. So making an application for an ADU, subsection D, design and site plan review shall be required for any ADU that meets any of the following criteria. Let me just go through them all. Number one, the construction of an ADU that exceeds the height of the principal dwelling up to the maximum height allowed in the zoning district. So if you have, for example, a one-story cape and you want to build a two-story ADU, as long as that two-story ADU meets the height maximums of that zoning district, you may be permitted to do that, but you have to go for site plan review. Number two is a two-story accessory building or adds a second story to an existing accessory building. Three, increases the lot coverage above the maximum provided in 421 for a lot without an ADU. Four, decreases the open space below the minimum provided in section 421 for a lot without an ADU. And five, where design and site plan review is required pursuant to section 154. And then finally, a building is being converted or added to in order to accommodate the ADU that has one or more pre-existing nonconformities. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions at that point.
Go ahead, Carol.
Do we need to specify that it's a special permit that would be provided by the planning board?
For what?
Just in general, special permit. So in certain sections of the bylaw, I believe it says special permit with the ZBA versus planning board. Do we need to specify that in this section?
Could you give me the reference of the section you're quoting from?
I think it's all in 1.5.4, but ARA might be better.
Well, again, we can't have special permits as part of the core of the bylaw. There's only one way that special permit is part of this, and that's if you want to exceed the increased lot coverage or reduced open space. If section 1.5.4 essentially, if you're going through that design and site plan review process for that section, then your ADU would have to go through that as well.
I think we're talking
Okay.
about things. So it's in this section, it says an application for a special permit for an ADU shall include the following, but I don't know if we need to identify who would be the board reviewing the special permit. Is all.
Carol, in the I just checked on this one. In the portion of the bylaw where applicants are given the option to seek a special permit to exceed the lot coverage and open space requirements, it specifies that an application for a special permit for that purpose goes to the planning board.
Thank you.
If something is being channeled through 1.5.4 because you're exacerbating a pre-existing nonconformity, 1.5.4 specifies where that goes. I think it's generally the Board of Appeals.
Yeah. All right, before you go, I saw Bob McGuy has his hand up. Bob, we typically go through this as the board and have the public comment at the end. But if you have something urgent, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. All right, go ahead.
So the state bylaws allow a special permit for a second ADU on a lot that's still there, correct? One is protected, allowed by right if they comply with all this bylaw regulations. However, if someone wishes for a second one, that would be by a special permit.
If it meets the requirements of our current bylaw, yes.
Yes, I mean, that was in the state bylaw that the second one would be allowed by a special permit now. If that's what the town wishes, I didn't read that anywhere in this bylaw. I could be mistaken. I just want to make sure that, it is there that someone comes back for a second one that's only allowed by a special permit, or it would be allowed by a special permit. Again, with this board, the planning board, not the Board of Appeals, I just want to make sure that if possible, that could be added somewhere, or if it's there, it's fine.
I believe the state regulations, so I'm familiar with the provision R is referring to. I believe the state regulations authorize towns to allow second or subsequent ADUs on lots, and if the town so chooses, those ADUs must be by special permit. The regulations do not require the town to authorize multiple ADUs on a lot the same way they require towns to authorize single ADUs on a lot. I do think there's a rare circumstance where in Belmont where somebody could seek to have a second ADU in a historic accessory building pursuant to section 611. But that would be an unusual situation, and I don't see any obligation to authorize second or subsequent ADUs in the ordinary course.
Okay. Chris and Paul, do you want to continue to the end of this document?
Yes. So there were some significant changes to 614.9, changing the title from other circumstances requiring special permit to pre-existing non-conforming structures. And only A and B, which are highlighted right now, are the remaining two items. Everything else was struck out, as you could probably see in the bylaws that we sent you. So these, based on, Paul took a very strong look at this, and the last three sections, there's some significant changes, and I have no objection to them, but essentially they simplify these sections by talking about pre-existing non-conforming structures. The conversion of any non-conforming structure or portion thereof to an ADU shall be permitted in accordance with section 153 and 4. And then alteration, reconstruction, extensions, or structural changes reasonably necessary to convert a non-conforming structure or portion thereof to an ADU shall not be deemed to increase the non-conforming nature of the structure so long as the structure will continue to be located in the original footprint. So that's 614.9.
So I'll say quickly, this is fairly straightforward. Subparagraph A is meant to channel the proposed use of a pre-existing non-conforming structure to be converted into an ADU to the well, and I believe long-established provisions Belmont has to deal with pre-existing non-conforming structures. Subparagraph B is just meant to make clear the standards that Belmont will judge relatively minor modification and necessary modifications in order to create the ADU by. For example, if you're building into a pre-existing uninsulated garage, you're probably going to need to make some utility alterations, and you're probably going to need to do some real work on the walls to get some insulation in there. And this is meant to avoid any quibbling over whether that's the kind of change to a pre-existing non-conforming structure that requires further review. And then I think I can probably quickly explain 614.10. This provision was originally something Chris had crafted quite carefully to ensure that the town was tracking ADUs in a manner consistent with what the state seemed to be asking for. In the final regulations, the state's data collection asks are things the town can meet in the ordinary course of processing applications for building permits. The state is essentially asking how many applications to build an ADU have you received, how many of those were authorized, and how many were built. None of that requires a separate registration or certification process. And in those circumstances, in the interest of not giving the town more things to keep track of, my recommendation is to channel the certification process that Chris had devised into the ordinary certificate of occupancy process, and to do the same for authorizing any pre-existing, let's say, dubiously lawful ADU that wishes to become authorized.
Yeah, so we eliminated that 614.11, and the last section will be enforcement. Very simple statement. Inspector of Buildings to administer and enforce the provisions of this section. So at this point, we can go back to any section you want to look at a little more carefully.
Let's go back to the dimensionals, the dimensional table. And I have two questions about this. One is, where's the part that says this, is this highlight part the part that says like this 5% bonus can only apply to the ADU? You can't just build like a house that's, 4% bigger than what's allowed, as long as you leave 1% for an ADU.
So the highlighted section says that, but that's also why I wanted Chris to walk you through 614.5D earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So that second sentence, the principal dwelling and any driveway, parking space, or accessory structure other than the ADU shall still be subject to the lot coverage and open space requirements of section 421. Explains how you calculate, explains that for everything other than the ADU, you're still looking at the ordinary requirements.
And also that note at the bottom saying that these dimensions are only applicable for the establishment of an ADU as part of or as a new accessory building or new building addition.
Andy.
Yeah, so my question has to do with the enforcement, the last item in this section. And that is, what happens if somebody uses the relaxed requirements to get permission to build an ADU, and they go ahead and build it, but then they don't use it? They just use it as an extension of their own property, and they don't rent it out to anybody. Is there any consequence that should arise from that?
Well, it's a good question, and
Process.
something actually that was discussed by the preparation group in the town meeting, preparation. And one of the things that is sort of a natural thing that prevents that would be that you're putting in a brand new bathroom, you're putting in a brand new kitchen, and a lot of these provisions, certainly somebody may want to bump out their house and have like a party room or something like that. But I think we're going to be approving sets of building plans that are building a dwelling. They're building a bedroom. It's going to have a living space. It's going to have a bathroom. It's going to have all the provisions of that. The other thing is that they have to, when you get your certificate of occupancy, it's for that specific thing. So there's an inspection for that. And the other thing that happens after that is that the assessor comes by and checks on that second unit. And if it's being used differently, then the property is going to be assessed differently, and that's going to be reported back to the inspector of buildings. There may be some other ways that can be protective as well.
And just to be clear, the inspector of buildings has a number of enforcement measures for this kind of situation.
Thank you. Carol?
Just to follow up on what Andy said, I think that where we could see this also is when properties change hands, because we see properties that have accessory dwelling units or two families that are then converted to single families in the future and things like that. So what a previous owner did doesn't need to be maintained by the current owner. So, I mean, if somebody has an ADU in the basement and the new owner says, I just want to have it as a finished basement, they could remove the kitchen, obviously with the appropriate permits and things like that, and just have it as living space in their own home. So I think that there's going to be some limitations of what we can do with enforcement, especially when the properties change hands. And that was part of the motivation to exclude new construction from some of these bonuses, because we don't want a builder to necessarily just build a bigger space and call it an ADU that wouldn't necessarily be used for the intended purpose.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ara.
So an ADU has to be a separate unit from the remaining of the building, meaning there's not going to be any doors or entrances from one to the other. And if it's an ADU, it's going to be in our records that it is an ADU. And if at one point or another they try to open an opening, put a door, and merge the two units together, then that would be a violation of the permit. And we'll do our best. Of course, we don't have enough staff to go and check every single ADU every time. However, I'm sure that the neighbors most probably will contact us. They will let us know what's going on, and that's going to be the way that we have to enforce it. Again, there should be separate units. They're not going to be part of the existing dwelling, and we'll do our best to enforce it. Otherwise, that's how I envision doing it.
Yeah, Ara, can I just add in? I think we all know that lots of people do illegal stuff with their homes, right? I think we all know that there are plenty of zoning bylaws that get broken by homeowners on a routine basis. But I think we, as the planning board, we can't let the tail wag the dog and sort of try and back into how do we prevent anyone from ever, sneaking around this rule, because we just don't. Unless we want Ara to start busting down people's doors to find that kind of stuff, I don't think it's going to happen. So,
one of the things,
as your lawyer, I will say there are very limited circumstances in which Ara can bust down people's doors.
yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize also that the town clerk also said that the ADUs will be assigned an address, and that's another way to track this.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Elisa.
I just had a question. Is that true? Like if someone put an ADU in their basement, there could conceivably be a way to get from the ADU into the main house. Like what if, I wanted to turn my basement into an ADU for my elderly parents? Like, I have no problem. I can lock that basement door and keep them out, but like, how does one put an ADU in their basement and not have a door into the main structure?
All right, do you have an answer for that question?
Separation between two units is going to be a 2-hour separation, and that's going to be a very thick wall with all kinds of double sheetrock, wide walls, and everything else. And at the time of the inspection, our inspection, we're going to make sure that there is a 2-hour separation between those two, regardless if it's an addition in the basement or the attic or attached. So for them to remove and create an opening from one to the other is going to be a challenging task. So I'm not saying they're not going to try if that's their intention. However, it's not going to be something simple to say someone is going to take a sawzall and cut an opening and call it part of the unit. And when they come back to sell the house, then they have to recreate the ADU before the fire department goes back to inspect the building, or it would be on the assessors to say that this is what it is. So, I mean, there are many ways for us to know that if someone is really combining. Now, if someone's in-laws
No, I'm not worried about people combining. I'm just questioning.
That's allowed.
And maybe Chris or Paul knows the answer to this. Like, can one really, like, how? Sorry, I just want to. I'm not sure my question is being understood. How does one finish one's basement as an ADU legally if you can't have a door between, like, most people can currently go down into their basement. So what happens if they want to make their basement an ADU?
You have to basically close off the door. Is that what you were saying, Ara?
Or you would have to not use the entire basement for the ADU, I think is the other possibility.
Because everybody's mechanicals are in the basement. So you need some kind of access.
Yeah, there's such a thing as a
Again,
fire
you
door.
have to-
You can get a
Yeah,
rated door to install. So
I think we're talking about two different things. Can I clarify?
Well, are we? I mean, Elisa, is that kind of what you're asking? Is what are
Well, yeah, I guess what I was asking is if somebody wanted to convert their basement into an ADU, how would that happen? And Taylor, to your point, all the mechanicals are down there.
I can also offer a data point. I live in an old single family that was converted into a 2-family in part by using the attic to create the upper level unit and the basement to create the ground floor level unit.
mm-hmm.
Some of our mechanicals are simply in my downstairs neighbor's home, and if I have not yet had to take my key to their home and go in there and deal with any problems, but that's also an arrangement that that works, that people have. There are a number of ways to make this work, subject to the building code and the fire code, which we all knew still applied to new ADUs, separate from the state statute, but which the state regs are now unambiguous. The state is not trying to overturn here.
Carol?
So Ara was talking about the 2-hour wall, so that's fire code, so that's separate from what I believe you're talking about. What I've seen for ADUs that are in single family homes is that you usually create a new hallway. So depending on where your basement stairs are, if they're closer to the front door or the back door, you have basically a separate hallway there where that becomes a common entrance. So there is an entrance that goes to the stairs to the basement, and then an entrance that goes into the primary dwelling unit. And so that's how you have the separation of spaces. And then typically from the basement egress, there is a door. You typically have the basement egress close to the utility space. So then that can be common space. So you can access the utilities for both units and then have the access into the private space of the ADU.
You, Ara.
must have two means of egress, one the main entrance door and one the exit, and that it has to be for the ADU, it has to be separated from the other units, period. I mean, that's all building code and fire code is fine, as Paul said. And my worry would be more about people creating a second unit without a permit rather than having an ADU with a permit and then combining it with the main house. But again, I mean, there are so many ways. I mean, just combining them together, it's really going to be inexpensive. It's not going to be an easy task. And if they apply for it, definitely they're going to be denied. And if they do it without a permit, and at one point or another, if we are aware of it, myself or in the future, whoever, then they have to enforce it. It's part of the code enforcement. So we have to do what we can and do our best.
Thank you. All right. So are we all clear on this? Can we go to some of the other sections?
Yep.
Okay, great. I guess, sorry, I meant the other section. We do need to finish up the dimensional table. I think we got to ask, because Chris, what you proposed is that basically to accommodate parking spaces in these lots outside of the transit adjacent zone, that we reduce the open space minimum by 2% across the board, right? To accommodate.
2%?
Well, I'm looking at open space minimum seems to go down by 2% on every other line.
Yeah, that's because though, yeah, right. Yeah, those are the outside of the transit adjacent lots.
Exactly. So
Yes.
do we think that's the right way to do it? Because that was where we last had a question. We decided to move on and finish it now.
I thought it was the simplest solution. I mean, I think anything more will get a little complex. I think if you wanted to change it, what I would recommend is just get rid of it and just go 45% across the board, except for general residence. I mean, that actually further simplifies it, but you know, there will be some districts that might have some challenges with that, especially the smaller single residence districts. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference in single residence A, for example, but you get into some of these smaller districts, and it certainly might be something that they bump up against.
There, and Carol, you were the ones that had the question on this. So what do you think about the two
Well,
options?
that was my point, was just, it's fine. I understand it in single residence C and general residence. I'm kind of agnostic about B, but A, those lots are huge. I just don't see why we would even do it for A. And that was all I was saying.
So it's
Was in
just
order
A.
to just remove one line out of this table. I mean,
So
that's all. That was
Okay.
my.
how does the rest of the board feel about that? Renee, do you have a thought as our planner?
I think I agree with what Thayer said.
Mm-hmm. Andy?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I
Carol?
don't, the 25,000 square foot lot is not, I don't think all the lots in SRA are that size. I know I'm in SRA and my lot is not that big.
Carol, did you have a thought? Any opinions on it?
I think what Thayer said makes sense.
Okay. Elisa?
I'm agnostic either way.
All right. So it sounds like we've got some momentum behind their suggestions. So why don't we just strike that line, Chris?
Okay.
Okay. Why don't we, before we move on to the other sections, I see Bob's had his hand up for a while. And so before we move on from ADUs, I'd love to hear from the public and then maybe take a vote from the planning board on if we are comfortable proceeding with what we've got here. So let me see if I can let Bob speak. Bob's hand is down now, but Doug's is up. All right, Doug. As you know, as you probably know, 2 minutes the first time around, and then
Bob is here. Bob is in.
Okay, I'm here.
oh, Bob is here. Okay. All right, Bob. We usually give folks 2 minutes to make their comments, and if they feel they've got more, they can get back in line and get another minute.
I have read the drafts and have made comments on grammar and punctuation. I've not I've stayed away from anything dealing with policy. Right now, there are two things that are ambiguous, and I think they need to be fixed. Number one is you have a reference to TA in the table on 6.14.5. There's a footnote down there that says TA, and then TA doesn't refer to anything referenced elsewhere in the bylaw. So you should fix that, I think. I don't know if you see it.
Yep, right there.
Yeah. So I don't know what TA stands for, but
Jason.
Yes, I'll say to the board quickly, I saw this in Bob's list of comments. It is meant to refer to lots that are within the half-mile radius of transit that's used for parking purposes in the bylaw, and we'll make a change that carries that through.
just fix that, yeah. The other ambiguity is in 6.14.8 D1. D1 sets up a series of tests, and it says, if you meet the test, then you have to have site plan review. The first test is, I find it ambiguous. I think what the intent is, if you're going bigger than the principal dwelling, then you have to get site plan review. If you're going, maybe if you're going bigger than the principal dwelling, but not above the maximum height for the zoning district, you're exempt.
Mhm.
But the way it works is, you're just reading the words, and you guys can apply the intent.
Yeah.
But if you're going to construct an
You got
ADU
about 10 seconds. Sorry.
that exceeds the height of the principal building up to the maximum height, then you need site plan review. But if you were up and above the maximum height, you would not fit the definition and would be exempt from site plan review. But that could be
I can
Thank
with a few words.
respond briefly if I may.
Sure. Go ahead, Paul.
A proposed ADU that would exceed the maximum height allowed in the district would require a variance, as is set out elsewhere in section 614. Height limits applicable to the principal dwelling apply to the ADU. So the idea is that if the ADU is going to be taller than the principal dwelling, but within height limits allowed for the principal dwelling in the district, there might be an aesthetic consideration that deserves design and site plan review. If it is going to be taller than the maximum height allowed in the zoning district, then it needs a variance, which is a more searching process than design and site plan review, and design and site plan review is superfluous.
Okay, I've suggested language to fix that to achieve what you're trying to say, to make it easier on the reader.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Bob. I think let's move on to Doug, because he's been waiting patiently.
Doug, you're unmuted, then you muted again.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Taylor. So two quick questions, I think mostly for Paul. I had a concern that protected ADUs in the LB districts weren't clearly restricted only to places where there was already a special permitted single family. I think you said you're confident that's not the case, Paul?
Yes, and I'm happy to walk you through the details, but the short answer is yes.
Okay. And then the second thing that I saw is in a couple of sections, there's references to if you build something within an existing structure, there are reduced requirements, or it can be closer to the front lot line. So 16.14.7b, 14.5C are two examples. I wasn't clear that something had to be 100% within it. I was concerned that it might be interpreted as it could be within it and then also expand the footprint of the structure, which I thought would be problematic.
Yes, I take the point. It's the intention was to not allow the provisions preventing an ADU from being closer to the front lot line to prevent somebody from putting an ADU in a pre-existing structure that's closer to the front lot line, which I'm sure you grasped. I would have to give a bit of thought to how these provisions work with section 1.5.4, but if I and the rules on alterations to pre-existing non-conforming structures. But I think the general rule of 1.5.4 is that if you're not drastically increasing the gross floor area and you're not exacerbating a nonconformity or creating a new one, you're okay. So for the most part, any of the kinds of extensions past the building's existing footprint that you're concerned about would only be a concern if in a situation where we would ordinarily allow the expansion of the non-conforming structure as of right. If it's already projecting into the front setback, for example, we would not let it project any further into the front setback under 1.5.4.
Okay, if you could just keep my concern in mind as you go back into a final pass, I would appreciate it. The state language on accessory structures and changes to them was a little murky to me. So, if, you know, the goal is don't have it closer to the front, don't have it closer to the sides. Don't and try to have within, not actually increasing the footprint in negative ways. That's
Thank you,
it.
Doug.
Thank you.
Carol.
Follow up on that for Chris and Paul. Would it make sense to maybe say pre-existing conforming structure? Or add in something to what you just spoke about, Paul, that if it's going to create a nonconformity or something like that?
So the state regulations are meant to protect the use of pre-existing non-conforming structures for ADUs. I think they're imagining the exact same garage in the setback that's been there longer than the setback requirement that everyone on this call is currently imagining.
Right.
Please.
I was just going to say there's language in 1.5.4 that references a legal existing nonconformity or something like that. Maybe using something like that instead would provide appropriate clarification there.
So that's why in 6.14.9, we direct the construction of any nonconforming structure to be governed by sections 1.5.3 and 1.5.4. And that, in effect, imports the requirements of 1.5.3 and 1.5.4 that the nonconformity be pre-existing or lawful.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Chris, in terms of where we go from here tonight, so we did have a couple of edits, right? We're striking that line on the table.
Right. And we're correcting the acronym that needs to be spelled out.
Okay. So is there anything that we can do to provisionally advance this tonight, or do we have to wait until you guys make those edits? Wait until our next meeting for you guys to make those edits?
Well, I think, go ahead, Paul, but I think that we have in the past, we have provided for a recommendation to town meeting and then made some minor changes after that. So I think you've already articulated the changes that you want, and we will do it exactly as you've directed. there may be a couple of small things that Paul finds that fall into that other category of modifications that we can make post planning board, but pre-town meeting.
Okay.
So
So can we then say, for example, we move to recommend favorable action conditioned upon striking that line from the dimensional table, and I think you said changing TA to transit adjacent.
Yep.
yes, and I would just ask for a supplemental subject to capitalization or minor grammatical corrections that do not change meaning.
Okay. So I'm inclined to move that. Before we do, Carol, do you have a quick comment?
I just have a question. Sorry, we didn't go through this before. 16.14.3, do we need to strike that section about removing about the foundation isn't required? Was that something that was in conflict with the state?
Actually, I'll let Ara answer that question.
I was thinking of that when you were explaining the difference between mobile home versus, manufactured home. And, I was thinking of manufactured in like the prefab, but I think.
Sorry, just 1 second, Carol. Just in the interest of time, because we're now 10 after 8 and we've got a full agenda, can we just ask Ara? Ara, can you please answer Carol's question?
He may have stepped away. I'll try to do it as best I can, and then he may get back in the meantime. Ara said that in our building code, we already have requirements you must have foundation. And he said if you have a provision that talks about foundation, why not have provision that has a discussion of a firewall or something like that. So he said it was redundant and unnecessary because the building code requires it anyway.
Thank you.
Section 6143 is redundant and unnecessary.
No, the provision
Yeah,
B
right.
Sorry,
that required the
it's necessary.
yeah, is not necessary. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so if the board is ready, so I move to recommend favorable action at town meeting on the ADU bylaw as discussed, subject to striking. Yes, Chris.
Do you want to refer to all of the chapters that make up this bylaw,
Sure.
or do you
Sure.
want
So, okay. So I'll move. I'll cite the chapters. Okay. So I move to recommend favorable action at town meeting on the ADU bylaw amendments to sections 1, 3, 4, and 6, conditioned upon the following: striking the line about single family residence, open space minimum requirements as discussed, and changing TA to transit adjacent, and allowing for grammatical and clerical cleanup.
Second.
Okay. Fair.
Aye.
Renee.
Aye.
Elisa.
Aye.
Carol.
Aye.
I also vote in favor. Andy, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right. So that is 5 in favor, no opposed, no abstentions, and the associate member also voted in favor. Okay. Shall we move on to the MBTA bylaw amendments to sections 2 and 9? Hopefully this is super straightforward.
Absolutely.
If I may, Chris, do you want me to stick around for this?
I don't think you have to, Paul, but thank you so much for coming.
Anytime. Thank you very much, all.
Sorry, just trying to get ShareFile to behave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is section 2. And the only change is basically adding this right here, multifamily overlay district adopted at the 2024 special town meeting. And when we have this provided to town meeting, it's going to be an underline formatting. So if you have any questions about that, I don't guess you do, but if you do, let me know. And then for section 9, increase the size there as well. We've done is for MOZ 5B, right here, change the rear minimum setback to 6 feet, which matches the underlying commercial zoning for our only MOZ 5B parcel that we have.
Okay. Any questions on this or comments? All right. Then I will move. So I move to recommend favorable action.
Right.
Yes, Chris.
Do you want to have any public comment on these as well?
Is there any public comment?
I actually just have one quick question.
Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Chris, can you just clarify? I know we had had conversations about if there was an MOZ 5B that was adjacent to residential, then a different provision in the bylaw would already kick in. Is that, I just want to confirm that's correct.
Yes, it is. If
Only 5B, but just in case for future changes.
yeah, it's a greater setback.
Great, thank you.
All right. I suppose I'll ask any comments from the public. I didn't see any before, but maybe there's a couple of people who want to raise their hands. Okay, seeing none. I move that the planning board recommend favorable action to town meeting on the MBTA 3A bylaw amendments to sections 2 and 9.
Second.
All right. Thayer,
Aye.
Renee,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
Elisa.
Aye.
I also vote in favor. Andy.
Aye.
Okay. So that's 5 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions, and the associate member also votes in favor. Okay. I might switch up the order a little bit. We will come to the applicants, but I want to make sure that we talk about some pretty important stuff before we start to lose people. So let's talk about the Leonard Street zoning and discuss specifically the public hearing schedule. Tonight is not the public hearing for Leonard Street, so let's limit comments to the schedule for the discussion with the public. So Chris, do you mind pulling up the mooted schedule?
Yes. So let me just share my screen again. So I went through this exercise, very similar exercise that I did for MBTA communities to try to slot in where the planning board meetings were going to be. I proposed some potential dates for public meetings and a variety of other things that relate to town meeting preparation. So very briefly, this is February 4th, obviously, another planning board meeting on the 11th. We have the potential of a public information meeting on the 12th. If you guys are willing to sign off on that, we do have the space available. So we are prepared to do it if you're comfortable with that date. We do expect to receive initial feedback from the consultant on the 24th of February. We have another planning board meeting on the 25th. Then we've talked about the potential of a public listening session on the 27th of February and the 26th of March, skipping ahead just a little bit. And in between, there's an annual town meeting planning session. Those initial information from the consultant that comes on the 24th of February. We have a deadline of getting comments back to the consultant by the 10th of March. We have to submit a legal ad to the newspaper of record for the public hearing on the 24th of March. And, you know, if this is all contingent upon a late May 19th town meeting for this. So if it's pushed off a little bit, we might have just a little bit more flexibility. So consultant provides revised code on the 31st of March. Our first notice in the newspaper of record is on the 31st of March, and the posting in the town hall also on that date. On the 1st of April, not intended to be humorous, but the revised code goes to town council for their review. Also on that evening is a planning board meeting. The town confirms that the code is public ready on the 3rd of April. The second notice in the newspaper of record is on 7th of April. There is a public open house. This is what was talked about previously with the consultant, that their second meeting in town is going to be an open house, which is going to be 2 to 3 hours of having storyboards around on easels, people circulating around. There'll be a consultant each of the easels explaining any questions that people might have. There's probably going to be some graphic renderings of what buildings might look like, and some other things to take a look at. So that, again, that's a public open house, and I think we pretty much have to have these public sessions in the Beach Street Center.
Mhm.
The public hearing opens on the 15th of April. Not meant to tax your patience very much, but that's the date. Deadline for citizen petitions for not November, take that out of there, but the deadline for citizen petitions, at this point, we don't know, but I'm sure that's going to be plugged in soon. Deadline for final zoning language in this scenario is the 25th of April. There's another planning board meeting on the 29th. Town meeting starts on the 5th of May. And then it's assumed that you either on the 29th of April or the 6th of May, because the final zoning language is now in that range, you're going to have amendments. And so I'm assuming that you'd close your public hearing either on the 6th or you could close it on the 13th. But, town meeting is already underway. And so the date of town meeting is 19th of May. And so that's what we've got here. But, again, it's tight. And, if there's any assumptions that I've made here that are questionable, let me know and I can keep working on it. But this is my first pass at it.
So let me ask you a couple questions. So I'm counting 3 planning board meetings with a public hearing on this. Is that right? So we start on, that'll be April 15th, the 29th, and the 6th of May.
Yep.
And then we also have, in addition to that, 3 kind of like public listening sessions.
Correct.
So a total of 6.
House.
Huh?
And the open house.
But let me just see. What's the date of the open house again?
The open house.
Here we go. The 10th.
10th of April. Yeah.
Okay, so 4 meetings with the public, but the open house is more of like showing people the work, right? It's not really a like taking input from the public.
Well,
So
I mean,
it's-
certainly they can provide comment, and what we may do is provide maybe an easel with the ability people can write down comments or thoughts. Maybe the consultant will be able to provide pens that people can write on the actual drawings that they bring. I don't know the exact way it's going to run,
Mhm.
but there may be an opportunity for public comment there as well.
Okay. So a total of like, let's say 6 or 7 meetings with the public. And then why does the hearing not open until April 15th?
Because we don't have the product yet.
I see. Okay.
I mean, we essentially, we could open it earlier,
Mhm.
but we really wouldn't have the final product, which is due. Let's see. we get the information from them on the 31st of March, which is essentially just enough time to get town council to take a look at it and prepare to open the public hearing.
Got it. And then, yeah, actually, how about go ahead there?
It's really, really aggressive. I'm just saying, and it's not just the public part. I feel like we'll get the code and have 2 weeks to sort of think about it. It seems like a lot. I also was surprised to see these planning board meeting schedules in February and March, because usually we meet the first Tuesday of the month and the third. So just saying, I don't know if someone had decided on that previously, but
I
that's.
can answer it there. I can answer the March 11th. Since town meeting is taking place on the 3rd and the 5th, I just don't think it would be fair to ask people to meet on the 4th.
What do you think there? Would you rather meet on the 4th than the 11th?
No, I think the 11th is fine. We just normally as a board go through the dates and set our schedule as a group. So I just didn't remember. So I think the 11th is fine.
Yeah, I mean,
But why
sorry,
next week? Why are we meeting next week?
Yes, but that's a good question. Because I don't think we have anything to discuss, because like McLean's not coming back. I don't know that we have any special permit applications, and we just took care of the stuff for town meeting. So okay. Go ahead, Carol.
What day is the election? Is it the 1st? We just
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, we'd have a planning board meeting on April 1st. That might be another tough day.
Yeah, no, we're not allowed to meet.
we can't have a public meeting on an election day.
Yeah.
We need to change the 11th of February and the 1st of April.
Yeah, I think we can cancel the 11th and then move the April 1st one. Is that what you were suggesting, Taylor?
I think that makes sense. Like, just move it to April 8th.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the board or comments from the board? Go ahead, Carol.
What's the plan for the format for the 12th?
Maybe Chris, you can answer this.
I mostly ask because I'm not available.
So on the 12th, the program would be a welcome and introductions. It would have a background in terms of the 2008 report on the center and the 2010 comprehensive plan. It would talk about the goals and the objectives of this particular project. And I think that's important to get out to the public. And then it addresses concerns of impacts in some areas, and then offers an opportunity for some public comment.
I think the public comment was kind of like the main value that we get out of it too, right? Like, I mean, I think we'll present information. Like, I think the presentation of information is great for context, but it has been put out there in a couple of different places, but it'll be a great opportunity to like just basically open it up and see what people think about this project. Go ahead, Elisa.
Just a simple question. What time on the 12th is the public information meeting?
It's at 7:30 at the Beach Street Center.
Mm-hmm. We should also, by the way, part of the reason I want to talk about this tonight is none of these are fixed yet. The planning board has to decide if this is the schedule we want to do. So, um, Renee, what do you think?
Apologize, I'm having a sore throat today.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Andy, any thoughts on the schedule?
It's aggressive, but we have a lot to accomplish, so probably unavoidable.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we do this? Let's take public comment on this, but if it's all right with everybody, I'm just going to limit public comment to the schedule. We're not going to talk about the substance of the project. And so if you're in the audience and you want to comment on the schedule, that's great. Otherwise, please just sit tight. As you can see, we're going to give you more opportunities. So I see Ira has raised his hand.
Hi, it's Ira Morgenstern, Precinct 7. What I don't see on the schedule here is any kind of presentation of a financial analysis. Unfortunately, on the 3A, we got a financial analysis on the morning of the town meeting. So I just want to understand who is going to do the financial analysis and when are we going to have access to it?
Good question. Chris, I mean, Chris, the consultant at one of the workshops sort of made a reference to like an economist they have on staff, and they made a rough estimate of how much revenue increase there would be if at full build out. And one of the questions we had is like, okay, well, after taking out incremental services, what would it be? And I think we didn't. I don't think we've closed the loop on that, but we put it out there into the ether.
Yeah, I think they are going to provide at the very least a revenue analysis. I'm not sure if we have the funds to do a full-blown fiscal impact analysis. And I think, frankly, I don't think it's necessarily our responsibility to do it for every project that we bring forward. But I do think that this particular project is going to be a fairly strongly revenue positive program, just on the very nature of what it is. So certainly we could probably make some estimates that are not as precision oriented as the fiscal impact analysis for 3A, which I think was a little bit more sensitive in terms of some of the revenue from housing units and things of that nature. But I will find obviously what's going to happen is that the zoning program has to be set first, because we're not going to do like 5 different scenarios and then have a financial analysis of each of them. That's not going to happen. So we have to have a program firmed up first, and then we can ask them to apply their revenue estimates to that. So and there may be some multipliers that we could use that are maybe we could draw those multipliers from the RKG work, which I still actually, believe it or not, I asked for the spreadsheet from RKG, and I think they really need to provide that for us, because that'll allow us to run fiscal impact on pretty much anything ourselves. So let me find out if I can do those 2 things, and we should have a date that we can plug in here probably next time we show this timeline.
Let me, am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on, Ira.
Okay.
You asked a quick question, so you get another one.
Okay. Revenue is great, but let's look at the net fiscal impact as relevant as it can be. I don't mean to make anybody's life difficult, but let's understand what we're getting into here, what it's going to cost us, CapEx, all that kind of stuff. It's the right way to analyze a project.
All right, thanks, Ira. Rena, go ahead. Rena, I think you're on mute.
Am I unmuted now?
No, you're all set.
Thank you. So following Ira's question about fiscal impact, there's a question a lot of us have, which is kind of basic before the February 12th meeting. And that is, and you can answer this either now, if this is a public planning board meeting, or at the meeting next week. Could you direct us to the conflict of interest language that governs the planning board? And to be quite honest, lots of us are quite concerned about the rush, the aggressive zoning plan, and the rush to get big buildings into Belmont Center. We would like to understand what the policy is and where the language is that we can access on conflict of interest of board members. So Taylor, as chair, I guess I'm directing it at you.
Sure. I don't know the exact, I don't know what part of like Mass General law you have to look at for a conflict of interest. And one sec, Chris, I mean, I think if there's something specific, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. I'm a real estate agent by day, but I've got no financial interest in any properties in Belmont Center. So
is there no language in the planning board's documents or manual? Does any, about your responsibilities as planning board members?
Chris, are there any, do you have an answer for Rena?
Yeah, that would typically be in the planning board rules and regulations, and we don't have that at this point. But we were working on it when we took on this project, so it's definitely in the works. And
could you create a link that the
I'm sorry, let
public
me
can
finish
have
if I
access
could.
to?
The best way to find out about the conflict of interest rules in the state are to, there is an office, a state office for it, but the town clerk is the one that actually works with all the different boards and committees on making sure that the conflict of interest law is understood and that there are tests that we take on an annual basis to make sure that we understand that law.
Could you share the one you're working on with the public at some point with a link? And then I'll be quiet.
Rena, so again, we're talking about the schedule tonight. We're not talking about the issues you're discussing. I don't know. Yeah, we'll circle back on that at a later point. But all right, any more comments from the public on the schedule or from the board on the schedule? Okay. So I guess a question I have for the board is, do you guys want to give this choice to town meeting? It's in this spring. One of the things I've been thinking about is the planning board actually cannot make any zoning changes. We can only stop them, right? We can basically stop them by sitting on our hands, but only town meeting can change the zoning bylaw. So I guess the question of the board is, do you want to follow this schedule so that spring town meeting gets to vote on this up or down? Yes, there. You're on mute.
I know. I'm sorry. My mouse is very slow. I think it's aggressive. I think we need to be I do think town meeting needs to review it. Absolutely. I think it's a good proposal and I'm really excited about it. I wouldn't be adverse to coming to town meeting in the fall, if that's what is needed to do a good job, get people on board and feel like it's the right project, or even June, or July, whatever time it takes to do a good job. I just think it's a really important project. It's the heart of our town and we need to do a good job. And I'm just not 100% confident when I hear the consultant thinks things are due in the fall and then now they're agreeing to them being done in the spring. And I just someone needs to make us all feel confident that we will have a great product in 8 weeks. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And that's what, I mean, 7 weeks, and that's what worries me about trying to get it to Springtown meeting. So,
Yeah, I suspect that if it starts to bleed, then the town meeting will accommodate that, right? But I think the expectation of us is that we're marching towards Springtown meeting and we're making an attempt at it. But I think most people get it that we want this to succeed. And if it takes a little bit longer, I think people have patience for that. But I think people, like pretty much everybody I've talked to has basically expressed frustration that this has not been done in the last 17 years and actually has limited patience for kicking it down the road again. I think people are like, hey, planning board, we appointed you to do a job, go and do it. And let us decide if we want it. So any other comments from the board?
I wasn't saying kicking it down the road. I mean,
I know.
I'm talking about getting it done in a timely manner.
Yes. Yeah, sorry if I mischaracterized my understanding of what you're saying. Go ahead, Carol.
I think if we can just clarify the scope a little bit more too, just to make sure we're really clear with what is being looked at. One comment that I've heard is that, we're going off of information from 2010, 2008 has been mentioned, 2006 has been mentioned. There's been a lot of changes on Concord Ave with the new high school that is certainly contributing to the traffic challenges. We have the library and rink opening, and those will be included in the mix as well. And I totally agree. Having more opportunities for what can be done in the center is definitely a huge priority, as well as looking at what can be done in many other areas of town. But I want to make sure that we're looking at this in a way that makes sense and that we know, the consultant mentioned changing the traffic pattern in the center. Is that going to be part of what we're looking at in a couple of months, or are we going to be looking to get more data before we do things like that? So I think really just clarifying what we're going to try to accomplish for Springtown meeting and what is going to be part of the longer term plan.
Yeah. I suspect that, I think what part of this exercise is, and I think the reason why we're working on Belmont Center is actually quite a bit of data on the shelf. And it's a matter of marrying up that data and filling in any gaps that have arisen because of the kinds of things that you mentioned, Carol. But the good news is we're not starting from scratch. There's actually, you said in 2008, you guys spent like a year working on it, right? So go ahead there.
And I would also say in terms of traffic, I think any major changes to traffic would require a big traffic study. Nothing's been, that would affect the metropolitan area. We did it during the summer. It was very successful. But what happens when school starts and, with different things? And just for some context, first year I moved here in 1997, they put a policeman at the bridge to try to direct traffic. And by 8 a.m, they had to have the policeman move because it had backed up traffic all the way to Medford and it had caused gridlock. So, for all the things people want to do to control traffic, it moves really well it's on its own. But sorry, that's a diversion. I just think we would have to hire a traffic consultant and do a regional traffic study if we were actually to permanently change traffic.
Chris, where does the and that's a good point. Chris, where does the traffic advisory committee factor into all of this? Or do we have, what existing traffic, what is the list of traffic studies that we have? Because I know Belmont Center's traffic patterns have been studied to death.
Yeah, I just got a list of traffic studies that have been conducted over the years from Matt Taylor yesterday. And I've put one of them up on the project website. I may put some others up as well. It's not to say that I've reviewed them, but I've just made an assumption that the most recent one may be the best one for now to put up there. And I don't know what these traffic studies have specifically analyzed, what kind of questions that they've asked, but there might be some information in them that might be workable to mine. My department doesn't work on transportation planning. That's the engineering department. But I'm certainly willing to work with, Glenn and Wayne to try to work out some sort of solution. I know that the BSC group, as you may have heard in your attending of the focus group on infrastructure, said that they had done a number of different analyses on traffic patterns under the bridge, such that there was a suggestion of considering roundabouts, but there wasn't enough space for that. And then maybe having signalization at the two different intersections. And that's still a possibility, but I don't know how far it's gotten. And so it's probably a good idea to check in with the Transportation Advisory Committee, which will be involved with the comprehensive plan, because there will be a transportation section in the comprehensive plan. And the last point I'll make is that whatever you do, and I think Thayer kind of hinted at this, whatever you do in the center is going to have an impact, not only regionally, but around other parts of Belmont as well. And so I think everything needs to be looked at holistically. And parking is another example of something that deserves the same kind of attention. So I think it's an important thing to meld with these projects.
Thank you. Okay. We have other business to discuss. So maybe how do you guys want to put our imprimatur on the schedule for this? Do you want to take a vote on this? Do you want to just say, hey, we're moving towards spring, our goal is to present something at Springtown meeting, and we're adopting a schedule that conforms to that? What is how do you all feel?
I think we need to talk about specific dates, at least the ones that are closer on the calendar.
All right, why don't we do that then? Which dates did you have in mind?
Specifically the 12th, mostly because I can't do that night.
Okay.
And don't want to schedule it around my calendar, but that's probably my only conflict in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding is the reason it's the 12th is because there's a conflict like almost every other night that we've been asked to avoid.
I think because of ADUs, this is getting there's a lot of like precinct meetings and warrant briefings, etc.
If we're not doing a planning board meeting on the 11th, could we do the public meeting on the 11th? Is that an option?
I remember what was on the 11th. There was a conflict.
We originally had a planning board meeting on for that.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like there was another conflict there too.
The town calendar has school committee meetings at 5:30 and 6:30, library building committee at 5, and the high school advisory council at 3. But I don't see anything else on the town calendar.
Yeah. I think the reason that the 12th was attractive is because there are no committee meetings on the 12th.
Chris?
Yes.
So the only thing I can't tell you right now is whether the Beach Street Center will be available on the 11th. I mean, I could probably get the auditorium again, maybe if there's no like play or something going on there. But tonight I won't be able to tell you whether there is a space available on the 11th. The only thing that I can think of maybe that you could do is give me the license to research it, and if a space is available on the 11th, either of those two spaces, then I can change it and post it. But
think,
if no space is available, we maybe can keep the 12th.
Look, here, let me just throw out this idea. So, Carol, I mean, I'm super sympathetic to your calendar constraints. The whole premise of this was to make this as widely available to the public as possible, right? To give as many people as possible an opportunity to attend. So to me, it's kind of like a no-brainer if we have to choose between a night with 3 committee meetings and a night with no committee meetings. I don't know if other members of the board have an opinion on that.
I think as long as there's some planning board representation at the meeting, I think the 12th is good. I do know that booking the senior center can be difficult because they do have a lot going on there. And Taylor, I agree with you that there's no public meetings happening on the 11th or
On the
12th.
12th, yeah. Out there, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I'm good with either night, but I totally agree that the Beach Street Center, it's really important. People love going there because it's so easy to get to park and get in and out of it. So it's a lot more sort of town friendly for events like this. So, I mean, all of us can't be at every meeting, so.
Right. Renee and Andy, did you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah,
No.
I agree with Sarah. I think Beach Street Center would definitely be the top choice, I think.
Okay. So we're okay with doing this on the 12th? Okay. Is that it? Is that a yes? I saw a lot of lookups. Can I get like a nod or a thumbs up or something or no? Okay. Got it. All right. Cool. So we'll do this on the 12th. How about the rest of the agenda? So we have the 2 planning board. Actually, Chris, do you have the agenda somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, so we're saying probably the meeting on the 11th we don't need, right? And then the meeting on the 1st we cannot have, so it's got to be the 8th. I guess my one other question, Chris, that we could maybe add here is it's not really a scheduling thing, but can we have a comment like form on the website, or have just like the survey link living on the website, or a survey link living on the website?
Absolutely. In fact, I reached out to IT last week, right after our meeting last week,
Okay.
and they said they couldn't work with me until this week. I didn't hear from them today. I didn't have the time to reach out to them, but I'm hoping that they can help me with something like that. I know that they were working. The one thing that is a challenge is that they don't have a webmaster.
I see.
And so everything has to be done by Chris, the IT director.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all based on his availability. But I did put out the email distribution list today.
Mm-hmm.
I already have about 70 signups, and in my inbox I have about 30 more. So I did send out my first initial blast, and expect to do a few a week. So I think that's certainly, I don't know if anybody wants to do anything on Facebook. I'll post any to the town, forums or anything like that, but that may be another thing. I certainly can't do that, but we definitely will try our best to do something on our webpage if the technology and the capacity of IT to do that is there.
Okay. Should we vote on it? Should we vote on saying like, hey, we support driving at this schedule with the goal of putting, giving town meeting an option at spring town meeting, with the understanding that if things bleed, they bleed, right? If it goes a little bit longer, it goes a little bit longer. And I don't know if we need to do a formal motion. Maybe we can just do a straw poll, right? So I'll raise my hand. I think the plan that Chris has laid out is good, and I'd like to move against it.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yes,
Carol and
thank-
Anna, saw your hands up. Renee, you're okay?
Yeah.
Andy's thumbs up. Carol's thumbs up. Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate all of you, and I think actually the public really appreciates that what we're doing and what Chris and Ara are doing to give the town options, right? To do kind of the due diligence so that they can choose if they want it or not. All right. So why don't we go back to our applicants, the de minimis determinations. So maybe let's start with 46 and 50 Hamilton. Can we bring things Tarley and can we promote Tarley
who's the
Yamamoto
other
to
one? Ara.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Charlie. Welcome back.
Yeah. Took us a while to get here today. How's everyone doing?
Good, thank you. Okay, so you guys have a de minimis request. Would you like to walk us through it?
Right. So these are the 46 and 50 Hamilton properties. We had initially had the intention of doing the attic just with a small bath and a small bedroom there. Given the fact that this house is a bit on the smaller scale, we are thinking about adding a dormer there just to improve the size of the attic. Mainly thinking about a family, they can use it for a playroom, but just to improve the area overall. And that would be conforming with the half-story calculations. So this would be for both 46 and 50 Hamilton. We would use the dormer or place the dormers facing each other so it wouldn't bother any of the neighbors.
Got it. So can you just explain why does this fall under like a potential de minimis determination as opposed to going back? Or do we just get to is it just because they changed the plan so we just have to decide?
Yeah.
Or sorry, all right, do you have an answer for me? All right. You're on mute, Ara. Go ahead there while we wait for Ara.
I would like to hear why this is de minimis, because this is actually a pretty big change.
I know what I'm asking. All right. Yeah. I have the same question.
I would definitely think it's not that big a deal, but I think it needs a public hearing because it's a big deal. I mean, we've rejected some of these sometimes, depending on the context, and I am I'm really sorry, but I do have to jump. It's my mother-in-law's 90th birthday and we're headed out for dinner. So I apologize.
Happy birthday to your mother-in-law.
Yeah, so I apologize. And that's my opinion on this. And thank you for everything. Bye.
Thanks there.
Okay, so my apologies, I could hardly unmute myself. So the question is in front of the board to decide if this is de minimis or they have to come back with a full application for review. That's the question. It's not that I'm suggesting it is de minimis. I'm just, the question is, it has to come to the board first for you to decide if it is or not.
There's no
Before,
situation where you would ever tell an applicant R like, hey, that change is too big. You don't even qualify. You can't like.
no,
All
not
right, so
me.
we've got to decide if this is de minimis tonight. Carol, go ahead.
So I bugged Ara with a couple of questions on this because, as many of you have heard me mention at other meetings, I feel like this gives the appearance of a 3-story structure, whereas we have a 2.5-story minimum. And each time I bring it up, I usually get shut down because it does conform to the half-story requirements. And as a follow-up to that, it was explained to me that the applicant, after this property is constructed, could do this dormer by right without any special permit approval. So that was something that I felt was relevant for us to understand.
Can you just explain that a little bit? What do you mean? So after they built this dormer,
So if they go forward with the building as approved at our prior meeting, they could then file a separate building permit to add the dormer, and that would be a by right permit project as long as it conforms to everything that's basically what's presented here tonight. Ara can probably explain it better. I think it was under 1.5.4, our favorite section of the bylaw, that everything seems to come back to. But looking at it, I mean, we could say no, and then they could just do it anyway.
So
yeah, but they would have to build it and then tear out a section of the roof.
Exactly, which would be very wasteful.
Yeah.
So if I may elaborate on this, in section 1.5.4a, the last sentence in the paragraph, I don't have it with me, but it reads that you're notwithstanding the following rules, regulations, which is the more than 300 square feet or such, dormers that comply with the with the section 4.2, which is the intensity regulations, do not have to comply with this section, which is like they're exempt. So mainly that's written for all existing buildings. My thing is, again, I'm not saying that this is good, this is bad. I'm not making any opinion. I'm not giving any opinions. But the minute I give them the certificate of occupancy and they can move in, then this becomes an existing building. And the following day or the following week, they may apply for this dormer. And if it complies with which they do, they have the lot coverage, open space setbacks, and everything else, as you have seen, that's how you will approve this. So I would be in a position where to approve this dormer because now that's an existing building. So this is where I'm in a jam here, so I don't know how to proceed with this. And again, if the board decides that this is not de minimis and they have to reapply, they can reapply for an amendment. And at that time, you guys can deny them. And that means that they have to build the way that they have been approved and then come back later and tear down the roof and do whatever they need to do. Yeah. So this is what's in front of us.
Okay. So, okay. Let me just ask, why would they be able to build this by right once it's complete, but they can't build it now? Is it just because the nature of special permits is we approved a plan, you have to build that plan?
That is correct. So you approved the plan. This is not the plan that you guys approved. However, once I issue the certificate of occupancy, then that becomes an existing building. It's not the new building anymore, or it's not the proposed building. And the dormers are exempt from the section. So, I don't know if they wanted to build it later or not. That would be another issue, but there is no time limit. It doesn't say in the bylaw to say that they have to wait for certain years before they can change. And this dormer section them would be exempt or not. I mean, that's the difficult part that I'm trying to figure out what I need to do.
Okay. Elisa?
Is there any kind of standard definition of de minimis change?
Yes,
Like-
whatever you decide.
Well, like,
Not like if it would be like sort of what we were saying is if it were an existing building, it would be allowed by right, therefore it's de minimis because it's nothing that wouldn't otherwise be allowed.
So any amendment to any special
I
permit
I
is
understand why.
necessary.
I understand because
No,
this
I
is an
know. I
amendment.
mean, it has to come to you first for you to determine. I mean, there's another project which they're not going to even ask. They're coming back to the board to request not review with the Board of Appeals. They're reapplying for a change, but since you know they had requested, it is part of my job sort of to say to ask first, since they have asked, and you can say no, there's not de minimis. They have to reapply for the whole permit for an amendment for this permit, and have public hearings, and will be advertised, and neighbors will be allowed to know exactly what changes they're making, and then the board will make a decision. Again, in this case, it's a dormer. It's a little bit different than putting an addition or changing, the character of the building or such.
Yeah. And let me answer me this, Ara. So this whole thing started just because by virtue of building on an open lot, they had to get a special permit, right?
And a design and site plan review in the GR district, correct.
But it was because it was an open lot, right? There's no existing house or anything like that, or was that the issue?
So actually, any new building in the GR district has to have a special permit. Any building, even if there was an existing building there to tear it down, it's allowed by special permit and by design and site plan review.
Yeah, here's what I'm struggling with. I think it is so I probably would not consider this de minimis. I think this is a material change to the design. Although the caveat is I think it is stupid that they have to get our special permit permission to build something that the building code allows, or that the zoning bylaw allows. But I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. Let's ask other board members. Like Andy, do you have any thoughts?
My thought is that dormers improve the attractiveness of the building. So I think this is an improvement. And one of the things I like about Belmont is that we don't have cookie cutter houses here. We have a variety of homes, all nestled with each other. And I just looked on Street View, this neighborhood, this is consistent with other houses in the neighborhood, maybe not the dormer, but the gable roof and 2.5-story aspect of it. So I would say we could call this de minimis for purposes of approving the, not having to re-vote on this structure.
Renee, do you have any thoughts?
I think many of the houses in that neighborhood actually has similar dormers. And also given that even if we don't approve this, they can always come back to get, the dormer by right later. And I think I agree with Carol that it's going to be a total waste of resources if we go with that route.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like actually we've got quite a bit of consensus on the board.
I just want to say that at this point, as a de minimis, you have more leverage on dictating what they can have, because eventually they have to finish with the insulation, with the roofing, with the framing and everything.
Yeah,
so
but you're saying, but Ara, you're saying that what they're building is something they would be allowed to build by right.
Well, correct. However, after they finish with the insulation and everything, for them to reapply and open up the roof and refinish everything is different than what I'm saying is the board has leverage now to save them cost later you might choose to request for, again, I don't have an opinion on whatever it is. I should not have, and I don't have one. You might say this is too large. You can make it a little bit smaller, just make it only whatever percent of the roof or something. This complies with the half story. That's one.
Okay.
However, if you want to have any, I mean, for them to save money later, you might say, if you do this, we'll consider de minimis, otherwise come back for, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm trying to satisfy both sides. I don't know
Yeah.
how that's going to work.
I hear you. I hear you. Thanks, Ara. Go ahead, Carol.
So I don't love this, but I have really always tried to have my decisions guided by what's in the bylaw. And where this is something that is basically allowed in the bylaw, I don't really feel that we have a reason to not approve it. I do think they went through efforts to make sure that the change to the neighborhood is not as impactful by having the dormers face each other. And if we can confirm this does not exceed the current height that we already approved, and obviously it's not changing the footprint, I don't really see anything that gives us grounds to not approve it, whether we do it now as a de minimis change or open the public hearing process again. And opening that process puts more stress on the building department too, by doing the notice and everything else. So
yeah,
those are my thoughts.
Thank you. This is the same height though. It says 30 feet, right? Like anything we determine de minimis is based on these plans. So if they go off and build a 32-foot tall house, that's illegal. So, okay. And why don't we, are we comfortable taking a vote on this? Or are there any other comments? I don't see any comments in the audience either. Okay. So we do need a motion. So I guess move to consider the sorry, one other thing, just to be buttoned up about this. We were discussing 46 Hamilton, but now we have 50 in front of us, and I know they are basically the same building, but can we pull up the 46 Hamilton plan? Elevation.
Would you like me to open it? It's
Yeah,
going to take me a minute.
Yep, just for crossing our T's and dotting our I's sakes.
Yep, just I need a minute to go back. I'm sorry. $50, and you need to see the 46. Am I correct?
The 46 elevation, the same thing that you're showing us. I just want to see it for unit 46, so that no one can say we were looking at the wrong thing.
Okay.
Okay, great. So move to consider the proposed change to, let's see, to 46 Hamilton Street, de minimis.
Second.
Okay. Elisa.
Aye.
Andy.
Aye.
Carol.
Aye.
Renee.
Aye.
Aye. That's 5 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Okay, so let's take the vote on 50 now. So move to consider the, and pull that up, please, Ara.
Yes.
Yeah. Number
Stop
50.
share. Yes.
You had it up there. It was the second tab.
No, I know. I had both open, so I got to figure out which one was which. This is 46. My apologies. And
over on the left, you got it.
Or it's the second tab over from the left. Yeah. Second tab over from the left.
This?
No,
No,
keep going,
this.
keep going, keep going. The other way. The other one more. One more.
This?
No, we'll go the
You
other
were
way.
almost there.
Yeah,
Go to the left, Ara.
I know what you're doing, Ara.
Oh, no, honest to God, I mean, this is the,
No, 50
Okay,
is right above the URL. Right
At the
above the
top.
URL. More, over to the left.
I'm sorry, my screen is probably different than yours. Here we go. Just give me a second. 50.
Okay.
Is this okay?
Yes, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Move to consider the proposed changes to 50 Hamilton Street de minimis.
Second.
Thanks. All right. Elisa,
Hi.
Andy,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
Renee.
Aye.
I also vote aye. That's five in favor, no opposed, and no abstentions.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. You have a good night.
Thank
Charlie.
you, everyone as well.
Thanks. All right. Next up, we have 43 Knox. I think it's Yafim is the architect. Yafim, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. Do you mind just walking us through the proposed changes?
Sure.
Thank you.
We have before and after pictures. This is approved picture. The next one would be corrected picture. Go through the yard. They're basically the same. The wall on the right on the first floor stays the same. The second floor wall, we want it to be above it per structural engineer request because he doesn't want to put this heavy LVL beams. That's about it. And we're just moving it a couple of feet to line up with the face of the first floor. The lot coverage stays the same, and basically all the architecture of the building stays the same.
Ara, is this still a conforming structure?
Yes, it is. I mean, nothing is changing except they're moving I mean, again, no opinion on my part.
Pushing out the second
Yeah, I mean, the
floor.
setback of the main, just give me, Yafim, just 1 minute. So the exterior wall setback, everything is the same, footprint is the same, lot coverage is the same, everything else is the same. And if this is gonna be in line with the first floor exterior wall, then everything, I mean, nothing changes.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Yes, Carol.
So my only comment on that is that we did have conversations about how much bigger this property is than anything else in the neighborhood. It's significantly larger. And one of the things that was presented by the applicant was that these setbacks or step backs, whatever you want to call them on the second story, did lessen the impact of the overall size of the structure. We did have a lot of interest from the public. It was our in-person meeting. It was a little enthusiastic that night. So that would be my only question.
And just to clarify, I think the public was supportive. There was the neighbor behind that asked us to make sure that we don't have a bunch of stormwater runoff.
Everyone wanted fences because they were concerned about the appearance, and this will be above the fence lines.
Yeah, but we had, okay.
And the neighbor to the right, number 33, he was very, very enthusiastic about our project. And after the meeting, he gave us a lot of compliments. So, and he loves the building, so he is absolutely on board with that.
Other members of the board have any comments? Lisa, do you have any comments? Andy?
Well, I did have a comment, but not about this issue. It was we were trying to decide how much drop there was on the site. And there was something I didn't understand about the site plan. So can we talk about that, or if not, then I don't need to talk about it.
I don't think we can talk about that in this discussion, right, Ara, because this discussion is about the de minimis, or whether or not the proposed change is de minimis, not the project as a whole.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Renee, any thoughts? Okay, you guys want to take a vote? Let's see if there's any comments from the public first. Seeing none. Move to consider the proposed change to 43 Knox Street de minimis.
second.
All right, Elisa,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Carol,
No.
Renee.
Aye.
I also vote aye. So that is 4 in favor, 1 opposed, and no abstentions. All right. Okay, a couple of so we only have a couple of things left.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so the projects that are outstanding, one, maybe we'll go through them in increasing level of complexity. So floodplain zoning, is there any update on that, Chris? Or
Ara and engineering are still working on language. I think they're very close. Ara, I don't know if you have any updates, but we still have just a little bit to go.
do you want me to keep checking in on this each meeting, or do you want to revisit as we get closer?
I think by next meeting will be, before next meeting, you will have the bylaws. The only thing is Wayne, our assistant town engineer, called the state, his name is Eric, to ask him about what we wanted to do is we also wanted to include 3 maps or maps with the bylaw to show the areas where there's there's flooding, or the areas with how many years, like 500 year, 100 year, etc. And the state told him that those plans are not finalized at this time. So most probably by town meeting, if they are, we're going to include the maps or the link to the maps. And if not, then we're going to just present the bylaws. The bylaws are, I would say, 99% complete or 95% complete. We've been working on it very hard since last week or the previous week. And there's a word here or a word there that we just want to bring it over to you for review. And once the state approves it, they're going to approve, and we're hoping that nothing would change at town meeting, because especially with the definitions, although this board or the town meeting might have had a different opinion on how it should be worded, we cannot change it. We're not allowed to, but the remaining as use regulations and everything is, that's what we're working on, and I think we're in good shape. So by next meeting, I think before next meeting, you'll have a copy.
Okay, great. And then Chris, when should we open the public hearing on this?
I think we can probably use the same public hearing schedule that we're using for Leonard Street. I don't think it probably is not a good idea to stagger them.
Okay.
But
yeah, after last week's doubleheader, I'm a little gun shy about doing 2 public hearings at once, but I don't know if the board's okay with it.
It's just a little complex to kind of juggle the different dates and the different advertising and all that kind of stuff. We may have some other things that go to town meeting in the annual as well, hotels, some other things. So the simplest way is to have that public hearing open for all the different things that you want. And then, as they move along, but if you guys want to do it differently, that's fine too.
Yeah. Lisa?
My thought on just having the 2 public hearings on the same night, given that it's not a one and done public hearing, that they're going to be continuing, is that perhaps we can just limit how much time each public hearing is allotted so that we don't have a 4-hour night after our 8-hour workdays.
Yeah. That is interesting. Let me noodle on that. Let me I like that idea because I think again, I think this floodplain zoning is like not like anyways, we don't have to discuss it a ton, but and actually in that spirit, why don't we revisit this at our next meeting?
Okay.
All right. The comprehensive plan, Chris, I don't think there's been really any change since our last meeting because the select board hasn't met again since our last meeting.
That's correct. We're still waiting for them to finish out the committee. So next meeting, we should have a report on that.
Okay. And then Brighton area, I know we've been pretty busy, and so I would not be surprised if the status on this is unchanged, but we still have, we've still hired a consultant, right?
Yep.
And it's just when we create the, yeah, so we'll progress on that when we can. Any questions from the board? All right. Are we all right if we just do the December 2024 minutes so that we don't go like 90 days without approving them? And then January 7th can wait till the next meeting. Okay, can we pull up has everybody had a chance to review the December 17th minutes? Yeah. Were there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, are you all right if I take a vote on this to approve them? Good, okay. Move to approve the planning board December 17th, 2024 minutes. Do I have a second? Okay, second from Lisa. Okay, Elisa.
Yes.
Andy.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes, and just also want to make sure that everyone who's voting was there at that meeting.
Let's see. I think so. Everybody, you guys reviewed it, right? So you were all there?
I think so.
Okay. All right, Renee.
Yes.
Okay. I also vote in favor. Okay. Just one formality. I think I have to move. We have to continue the public hearings on ADU bylaw amendments 1, 3, 4, and 6 to February 25th. 2025, and the MBTA continue the MBTA bylaw amendments section 2 and 9 hearing to February 25th.
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, so move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.
Have a good night.